A gang of roaring bikers circles a frightened 3-year-old boy on a lonely desert road, mocking his rusty bicycle. Just as tears well in his eyes, another engine stops beside them. The rider removes his helmet. It's Keanu Reeves. With calm authority, he asks one question that freezes everyone. Which bike here holds the most memories? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The Arizona sun hung low and heavy, painting the desert air in a haze of gold and dust. Heat shimmered off the cracked asphalt of County Road 17, the kind of forgotten road where silence had its own heartbeat. A single boy rode through it, his small frame hunched over a faded blue bicycle that had seen better days. The chain rattled, the back tire squeaked with every turn, and yet the boy, 13-year-old Eli Turner, pedaled like it was the most precious machine in the world. His backpack bounced against his shoulders. The dry wind tangled his brown hair as he squinted toward the far-off outline of his neighborhood. Every ride home followed the same route past the open fields, through the long stretch of road between nothing and nowhere, and finally to the small house where his mother waited after work. But today, the air felt different. The hum in the distance was not the wind. It was something deeper, heavier, rhythmic. Engines. Eli slowed, heart pounding. He turned his head toward the sound, and the horizon blurred with a flash of chrome and black leather. 4 motorcycles emerged from the dust, their exhaust echoing like thunder across the empty stretch. They moved fast and unrelenting, the riders forming a loose formation that looked more like a pack of wolves than men. As they approached, Eli's legs froze. His instincts screamed to move, but curiosity rooted him in place. The lead biker was a tall man covered in tattoos, his sleeveless leather jacket stamped with a copper vulture emblem spread across the back. His name, Blaze, was stitched above his heart. His mirrored sunglasses reflected everything and nothing, and when he grinned, his teeth caught the sunlight. Behind him rode 3 others, Rex, Tank, and Milo, each carrying the same symbol, each radiating the same careless energy that made people lock their doors when they passed. The roar of their engines drowned out the world. Eli tried to pull over, hugging the edge of the road, but the bikers fanned out, blocking both lanes. Blaze raised a hand, and the others slowed, circling the boy. The sound of idling engines filled the silence that followed, deep and taunting. "Well, what do we have here?" Blaze said, his voice rough, playful, dangerous. A little road warrior on training wheels. One of the others, Rex, leaned close enough for Eli to smell the gasoline on his jacket. "That's the oldest bike I've ever seen. You sure it's not from a museum?" They laughed, loud and mean. The echo rolled down the road like thunder, carried by the dry wind. Eli's fingers tightened around the handlebars. His lips moved, but no words came. His bike, rusted and patched with tape, looked fragile next to the glimmering machines that surrounded him. Still, he didn't back down. He lifted his chin just enough to meet Blaze's reflection in those cold mirrored lenses. Blaze dismounted his motorcycle, boots thudding against the pavement. "Where you headed, kid?" he asked. Eli's throat tightened. "Home," he whispered. Blaze smirked, glancing at his crew. "Home, huh? Then maybe we should give your ride an upgrade." He took a slow step toward the bicycle, the heavy soles of his boots scraping the asphalt. Eli's breath caught. Something about the way Blaze moved slow, deliberate, like a predator toying with a mouse, made his stomach twist. The other bikers closed in. Engines, still rumbling, creating a circle of noise and heat. Eli's pulse hammered in his ears. His legs wanted to run, but his heart remembered something else, a memory that rose like a ghost through the fear. A memory of his father, kneeling in their small garage, hands greasy, voice calm. "You treat a bike like a friend, Eli," he'd said. "Doesn't matter how it looks. What matters is the road it takes you on." His father had passed just a year later. Since then, Eli had never let the bike out of his sight. It was all he had left of him. Now Blaze stood over that same bike, laughing. "You sure this thing even runs?" Eli swallowed hard. "It does." Blaze tilted his head. "Maybe I should test that." He lifted his boot and pressed it against the front wheel, just enough to make the bike wobble. Eli jumped forward instinctively, pushing the tire back into place, voice cracking. "Please don't." The laughter faltered for a split second. Blaze looked at him, really looked at him, and something unreadable flickered in his expression. But before anything else could happen, a new sound filled the air. It wasn't the harsh roar of multiple engines. It was one deep, smooth, powerful, a distinct growl that seemed to carry authority in every rev. All four bikers turned toward the sound. A black motorcycle appeared from the heat shimmered down the road, its single headlight cutting through the dust. The rider was calm, composed, not rushing. He pulled up slowly, the engine lowering to a steady purr as he stopped beside the scene. The man removed his helmet. The air shifted. It was Keanu Reeves. The bikers exchanged glances, caught between recognition and disbelief. He looked at each of them, then down at the trembling boy, his expression unreadable but not hostile. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Without raising his voice, Keanu asked, "Everything all right here?" No one answered. The engines idled like nervous heartbeats. Eli looked up. Tears, still glimmering at the corners of his eyes, unsure if this stranger was real or a trick of the heat. Keanu's gaze moved from the boy's rusty bicycle to Blaze's gleaming chrome machine, then back again. He could see everything he needed to know. In one glance, the arrogance, the fear, the imbalance of power. He stepped off his bike, calm but deliberate, his boots crunching against gravel. The air thickened. He stopped in front of Blaze, close enough to reflect in the man's sunglasses. "Tell me," Keanu said quietly, "which bike here holds the most memories?" For the first time, none of the bikers had anything to say. Blaze blinked behind his mirrored lenses, caught off guard by the question. The others shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Eli wiped his eyes, looking between the men, then at his own bike. His voice trembled but found strength. "Mine," he said, "because my dad fixed it before he died." The world seemed to still. The wind quieted. Even the engines lowered to a soft rumble, like they, too, were listening. Blaze's jaw tightened. Rex looked down. The teasing smirk vanished from every face. Keanu crouched beside the bike, running his hand along the handlebar. "He did a fine job," he said softly. "You take care of it well." He stood again, his tone calm but firm. "Respect the road, and respect the riders who've earned it, no matter what they ride." Blaze stepped back, his expression unreadable. The laughter that once filled the air was gone, replaced by the weight of silence. Eli's heart steadied, and for the first time since his father's death, he didn't feel small. Keanu nodded once to him, then to the bikers. "Ride safe, gentlemen," he said. The desert wind carried his words like a warning and a promise. Keanu reached for his helmet again, his movement steady and unhurried. He slid it under his arm and glanced once more at Eli's bike. The sun caught the chipped blue paint, the same shade of sky that stretched endlessly over the desert. "Keep it shining," he told the boy quietly. "Memories deserve care." Eli nodded, his small hands gripping the handlebars like they were something sacred. Blaze shifted his weight, exhaling a slow breath. "Didn't mean any harm," he muttered, almost too low to hear. Keanu gave him a long look, not judgmental, but searching. Then he nodded once, accepting the unspoken apology. Without another word, Keanu mounted his motorcycle. The engine came to life, with a low, resonant growl that filled the silence. He looked at Eli again. "Go on, kid. Ride home." Eli started pedaling. His old bike wobbled at first, but then it steadied. The chain clicked in rhythm, the squeak fading as his confidence returned. Behind him, the bikers watched, their expressions softening. As Keanu rolled away in the opposite direction, the sound of his engine blended with the desert wind. The tension that once hung in the air dissolved, leaving behind a quiet lesson, one the bikers would remember long after the dust settled. And for Eli, That moment would live forever the day a stranger stood up for him, not with anger, but with calm strength. The sound of the engines still lingered in the air like fading thunder. Dust settled slowly around them, catching the orange light of the setting sun. Eli stood frozen beside his bike, his knuckles white on the handlebars. The four bikers shifted uneasily, their bravado slipping away in the presence of the quiet stranger who had stepped off his motorcycle. Keanu Reeves walked toward them with a calm that felt heavier than anger. He didn't speak right away. He just looked first at Blaze, then at the others, and finally at the boy. His gaze wasn't sharp, but it carried something deeper: understanding, patience, a kind of gravity that made even the loudest man think before speaking. He stopped a few feet from Eli and the circle of bikes. The desert wind tugged at his jacket. Then, in a voice both gentle and firm, he asked, "Which bike here holds the most memories?" The question cut through the silence. Blaze frowned, unsure what to make of it. Rex scratched his neck. Tank looked down at his own polished chrome Harley, confused. None of them answered. Eli blinked, glancing at Keanu, uncertain if he was supposed to speak. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Keanu nodded slightly, encouraging him without words. Eli took a small breath. "Mine," he said softly, "because my dad fixed it before he died." The wind fell quiet. Even the hum of the idling motorcycles faded into stillness. Blaze looked away, the reflection of the boy's bike glinting in his lenses. Rex shifted his weight, staring at the ground. The laughter that had filled the air only minutes earlier was gone, replaced by the heavy truth of a child's loss. Keanu knelt down beside the bike. His hands were steady as he ran his fingers along the worn metal frame, feeling the ridges of old welds and patches. The sunlight bounced off the faded blue paint, and for a moment, the machine didn't look broken. It looked loved. "He did good work," Keanu murmured, as if speaking to the memory of Eli's father. "This isn't just an old bike. It's alive." Eli swallowed hard. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "He used to fix cars, too. He said this one was special. We were going to paint it red together." Keanu nodded slowly. "Red's a good color. Strong. Honest. Like your dad." He looked up at the boy and added softly, "And like you." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't from fear anymore. Something else had replaced it. Something warm, proud, steady. Keanu stood again, turning toward the bikers. His expression never changed, but his voice carried more weight now. "We all start somewhere. Every rider does. The road doesn't care what you ride. It only cares how you ride it." The words hung in the air, echoing, between the empty desert and the thumping hearts of the men who had mocked a child minutes before. Blaze opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. For the first time in a long while, he didn't have a comeback. The silence after Keanu's words stretched long and heavy, the kind that makes men look inward. Blaze's eyes hid behind mirrored lenses, but his posture betrayed him. His shoulders dropped slightly, as if the weight of his own reflection pressed on him. The other bikers avoided looking at one another. The desert wind carried the faint squeak of Eli's bike chain, the only sound brave enough to break the stillness. Keanu's gaze lingered on the men, not judging, only asking quietly for them to be better. "A good rider," he said, "knows respect. For the road, for the machine, for the people who share it." He turned his attention back to Eli. "Your father taught you that, didn't he?" Eli nodded slowly. "He said the road's like life. You keep your balance by moving forward." Keanu smiled faintly. He was right. He brushed dust off the seat, then motioned for Eli to hold the bike upright. "He built this with care. That means something. Every dent tells a story." Rex cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "We didn't mean nothing by it," he muttered. "Just fooling around." Keanu looked at him, calm but piercing. "Sometimes fooling around can leave scars you don't see." He let the words sink in, not as a threat, but as truth. Rex's jaw tightened. He nodded, shame flickering in his eyes. Blaze folded his arms. "You talk like you know what it's like to be us." Keanu's expression softened. "I don't need to. I know what it's like to lose something that mattered." His eyes dropped to the bicycle. "And I know what happens when someone tries to take away a memory that keeps you alive." The desert wind picked up again, brushing across the silent group. Blaze glanced at Eli's small hands, still, gripping the handlebars. The boy wasn't shaking anymore. There was something new in his posture, a quiet strength that reminded Blaze of the brother he used to ride with before life hardened him. He swallowed, feeling something old and human stir in his chest. Keanu stepped back, giving the men room to think. His presence didn't command by force, it commanded by example. He placed a gentle hand on Eli's shoulder. "You did good standing your ground, kid. Takes courage to hold on when everyone else tries to shake you." Eli looked up, eyes glimmering. "I wasn't brave," he said. "I was scared." Keanu smiled slightly. "Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right, even when you are." The bikers said nothing. Blaze shifted his weight again, his voice quieter now. "Didn't think it hit the kid that hard," he admitted. "Guess we forgot what it's like to start small." Keanu nodded. Maybe today's the reminder. The engines idled softly in the background, no longer sounding proud or loud, just mechanical, human. The desert seemed to exhale, as if the moment had released something it was holding in for years. Eli stood still as Keanu's hand rested lightly on his shoulder. The gesture wasn't dramatic or grand, but it carried a calm strength that the boy had never felt before. For a moment, he forgot about the bikers, the fear, the embarrassment. All he could think about was his father and the sound of his laughter as they fixed the bike together on long, warm afternoons. Keanu looked down the empty stretch of highway, the horizon fading into soft orange light. "The road's big enough for everyone," he said. "Doesn't matter what you ride or how fast. What matters is the heart behind it." Blaze took off his sunglasses. His eyes, weathered from years of the open road, met Keanu's with something close to shame. He looked at Eli's small frame, the grease-stained handlebars, the dents in the metal. For the first time, he saw the story in them, the love that built the bike, the loss that still lived in it. Keanu gave the boy a reassuring nod. "Come on, kid, let's take a ride." Eli blinked. "With you?" "Yeah," Keanu said, smiling gently. "You and me. Let's give that old bike a rest for a bit." The bikers glanced at each other, unsure if they were still part of this moment. Keanu turned back to Blaze. "You want to do right by this kid?" Blaze hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I do." "Then let him ride without fear today." Keanu handed Eli a small, black helmet he kept strapped to his bike. "It's not about speed," he said quietly. "It's about trust." Eli slipped the helmet on, his hands shaking slightly. Keanu helped him climb onto the back of his motorcycle. The seat was higher than he expected, and his heart raced not from fear this time, but from wonder. As the engine roared to life, the wind kicked up around them. The bikers stood in silence, watching as Keanu guided the bike forward. The rumble echoed across the desert road, steady and strong. Eli looked back once, seeing the men who had mocked him now standing humbled, reflective, changed. The boy turned forward again, holding tight to Keanu's jacket as they disappeared into the horizon. The sun bathed the road in gold. For the first time since his father's passing, Eli felt something he thought he'd lost forever: freedom. Behind them, Blaze exhaled, his voice low and sincere. "Guess the kid's got more guts than we ever did," Rex nodded. "Or maybe he's got better company." The road fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of respect, of memory, of something that had shifted deep inside every man who witnessed it. Eli hesitated, staring at the massive black motorcycle gleaming under the desert sun. The chrome caught the light like liquid fire, every curve perfect and precise. The scent of gasoline mixed with dust and heat filled the air. He swallowed hard. "But I've never been on a motorcycle," he said quietly. His voice cracked slightly, the tone of someone standing at the edge of something far bigger than himself. Keanu smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile that mocked or pushed. It was the kind that carried patience and calm. "Then today's the first," he said. He opened the side compartment of the bike and pulled out a small helmet, black with a silver phoenix engraved on the side. The symbol glimmered faintly, like it had its own light. "This one's seen a few roads," Keanu added. "It's lucky." The bikers stood a few steps away, silent now. The earlier noise and swagger were gone. They watched with uncertain respect as Eli took the helmet in both hands, running his fingers over the engraving. The phoenix felt warm beneath his fingertips. He looked up at Keanu. "Is it really okay?" Keanu nodded. "It's more than okay. You've earned this ride." Eli took a shaky breath and placed the helmet on his head. It was a little too big, but Keanu adjusted the strap gently until it fit snugly. "There," he said, "safe and solid." When Keanu swung his leg over the seat, the movement was effortless, practiced. He started the engine, and the bike came alive with a deep growl that rumbled through the ground. Eli jumped slightly at the sound. Keanu looked back over his shoulder. "Hold on tight, kid." Eli climbed on behind him, clumsy but determined, gripping the leather jacket with trembling hands. The sun beat down, the air shimmered, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Keanu twisted the throttle. The roar of the engine filled the desert, scattering the dust into the air as they rolled forward, leaving the stunned bikers in their wake. The wind hit Eli's face like a wave. His first instinct was to close his eyes. But then he opened them, and the world opened with him. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of light. The desert rolled endlessly on both sides, painted gold and crimson by the setting sun. Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks soft against the hazy horizon. For the first few miles, Eli didn't speak. He simply held on and felt the rhythm of the road. The fear that had knotted inside his chest slowly unraveled. Each gust of wind carried a piece of it away. The sound of the engine wasn't loud anymore. It was music, deep and steady, like a heartbeat guiding him forward. Keanu tilted his head slightly so his voice could carry over the roar. "You doing okay back there?" Eli's reply was quick, but full of awe. "Yeah, I think I am." Keanu smiled beneath his helmet. "Your dad would have wanted you to feel this freedom." The words hit Eli harder than the wind. For a moment, he closed his eyes, imagining his father's laughter echoing through the open sky. The highway stretched on, a silver vein cutting through the endless Arizona landscape. The rhythm of the ride became almost hypnotic, each turn of the wheels syncing with Eli's heartbeat. The wind tugged at his sleeves, and the world rushed by in colors he'd never noticed before. Every mile took him farther from fear and closer to something he couldn't name yet: peace. Keanu rode steady, the bike gliding as though it belonged to the road. He adjusted his speed to keep the experience gentle for Eli, making sure the ride was smooth enough for the boy to take it all in. Occasionally, Keanu glanced in the small side mirror and caught sight of Eli's reflection, wide-eyed, smiling behind the helmet's visor. That alone made the long miles worth it. They passed cacti standing like silent sentinels and fields of red sand where the heat danced above the ground. A hawk soared overhead, circling against the fading light. The sound of the motor filled the quiet between them. But it wasn't noise, it was something deeper, like a conversation between man and machine. After a while, Keanu slowed the bike and pulled off the highway into a small roadside rest stop. It was one of those forgotten places with 2 benches, an old vending machine, and a view that stretched for miles. He cut the engine, and silence returned like a deep sigh. Eli climbed off, legs shaky but eyes glowing. "That was," he started, breathless, incredible. Keanu removed his helmet, setting it on the seat. His hair was windswept, and a hint of a smile touched his face. "It's different when you're not just watching the road," he said, "when you're part of it." Eli nodded, still catching his breath. "I never thought I'd feel this. It's like flying." Keanu opened the vending machine and bought 2 sodas. He handed one to Eli. "Freedom's got a sound," he said, tapping the can. "And a taste." Eli grinned and took a sip. The cold soda stung his throat but felt perfect against the heat. They sat on the bench together, the world quiet except for the whisper of the wind and the ticking sound of the cooling engine. After a while, Keanu asked softly, "Your dad, he liked bikes?" Eli looked down at the soda in his hands. He loved them. Said one day he'd get a real one, not just the kind in magazines. But he never could. He fixed cars for other people instead. His voice wavered, but he kept going. He said the sound of an engine was like music. When he worked on my bike, he told me, "It's not about how fast it goes, it's about how it makes you feel." Keanu listened quietly. His gaze was steady, patient, the way people look when they understand loss. "He sounds like someone who knew what mattered," he said. "Not everyone does." Eli smiled faintly. "He was my best friend." Keanu nodded. "And he still is, kid, just riding beside you now, in a different way." Eli looked toward the horizon where the sky met the road. For the first time in months, he didn't feel alone. The sky turned to molten orange as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the desert highway. The last light of day wrapped around them like a warm blanket, soft and endless. Keanu and Eli sat quietly at the rest stop, the sound of the cooling engine clicking in the background. Neither felt the need to fill the silence. It was a silence that spoke for them, full of understanding. After a few moments, Keanu stood and walked toward his motorcycle. "You know," he said, glancing back at Eli, "your dad built you something strong. He didn't have to give you speed. He gave you something better, resilience." Eli turned the soda can in his hands. "He always said everything worth having takes work." Keanu smiled. "Then maybe we should build something together. For both of you." Eli blinked, surprised. "You mean fix my bike?" "Not just fix it," Keanu replied, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Bring it back to life, the way your father would have wanted." The idea hung in the air, glowing with promise. The boy's face lit up in a way Keanu hadn't seen since they met hope returning like sunrise. As the stars began to appear, Keanu started the engine again. The roar wasn't loud or harsh. It was alive, steady, grounding. "Let's head back," he said. "There's a lot of road left tonight." Eli climbed on behind him once more, holding on tighter this time. He didn't feel fear anymore, only trust. As they rode off, the highway became a river of light beneath the stars. In the reflection of Keanu's side mirror, the desert disappeared behind them, replaced by the endless horizon ahead where grief faded and something new began. The drive west stretched into the next day, and by the time Keanu and Eli rolled into California, the air had changed. The desert heat had faded into a cool coastal breeze. When they turned down a quiet industrial street, the sound of motorcycles replaced the silence. Rows of custom bikes gleamed under the midday light, each one different, each one crafted with care. A metal sign above a wide garage door read, "Arch Motorcycles." Inside, the scent of oil, steel, and coffee filled the air. Sparks flashed from a welding station where two mechanics worked on a new frame. Chrome reflected the light like liquid mirrors. Eli stepped off the bike, eyes wide with disbelief. It felt like stepping into a dream, the kind of place his father would have loved. Keanu turned off the engine and looked around with quiet pride. "Welcome to my second home," he said. "And maybe your new classroom." Eli took a step forward, his sneakers squeaking on the concrete floor. Everywhere he looked, there was motion hands shaping metal, brushes painting designs, tools humming in rhythm. "This is amazing," he whispered. His gaze caught on a row of helmets lined up on a shelf, each one unique, each with its own story. From the back of the garage came a voice that carried authority and warmth. "Well, look who rolled in." A tall man with gray hair and sleeves rolled up, emerged from behind a workbench. His name was Marco, a veteran mechanic with decades of experience and grease under his fingernails that no soap could remove. Keanu smiled. "Marco, meet Eli Turner. He's got a bike that needs more heart than horsepower." Marco wiped his hands on a rag and extended one. "Nice to meet you, Eli. You like working with tools?" Eli shook his hand shyly. "I used to help my dad fix cars. Mostly, I just handed him the wrenches." That's where it starts, Marco said. Next thing you know, you're the one holding the torch. Before Eli could respond, another voice chimed in, light, confident, and full of energy. Who's the new recruit? A woman appeared from behind a row of workbenches, holding a sketch pad smudged with pencil dust. Her name was Tess, the lead designer, with dark curls tied in a messy bun and eyes that noticed everything. She looked at Eli's old bike, which Keanu was wheeling inside. That little beauty's got stories in her metal, she said. Keanu grinned. Exactly what I thought. He lifted the bike onto a stand with Marco's help. The old frame creaked, but held steady. Eli stood beside them, hands in his pockets, watching as Keanu examined the rusted spokes, worn chain, and cracked seat. We'll start here, Keanu said, turning to him. Not by replacing, by restoring. Every mark has meaning. We just remind it how to shine again. Eli nodded slowly, his voice quiet but sure. Okay, let's do it. Keanu smiled. That's the spirit. The work began that same afternoon. Marco brought over a stool and a tray of tools while Tess cleared a space under the skylight where sunlight poured through in dusty rays. Keanu rolled up his sleeves and said, let's start small. Every big project begins with one bolt, one wipe, one breath. Eli watched closely as Keanu demonstrated how to loosen the chain guard, the old screws resisting like they had memories of their own. When Keanu handed him the wrench, Eli hesitated. What if I mess it up? He asked. Keanu smiled. Then you learn. Mistakes are how the road teaches us. The boy exhaled and turned the wrench. The metal squeaked, the screw gave way, and the piece came loose. He looked up in disbelief. Marco chuckled. See? You've already started fixing things. Hour by hour, the workshop filled with the rhythm of work. Marco guided Eli's hands as he scrubbed the chain in a tray of solvent, showing him how to clean each link. Tess stood nearby, sketching new decals on paper. You want something special painted when we're done? She asked. Eli thought for a moment. Maybe the words my dad used to say. Ride, steady. Perfect, Tess said, smiling softly. Grease stained Eli's fingers, but he didn't care. For the first time since his father's death, the dirt on his hands felt like belonging, not loss. Keanu showed him how to polish the frame, how to restore the steel's reflection without erasing its story. We don't hide the scars, he said. We make them shine. When the sun began to fall, the garage lights came on. The hum of the fluorescent bulbs mixed with the clinks of tools and the distant rumble of bikes outside. Marco turned off the compressor and tossed Eli a rag. You've earned this break, kid. Eli wiped the sweat and oil from his forehead, laughing under his breath. I didn't think it'd be this much work. Keanu handed him a bottle of water. Everything worth keeping takes work. The boy nodded, staring at the partially restored bike. The old paint had been stripped, revealing bare steel beneath raw and beautiful. It looked stronger, alive again. That night, after the tools were cleaned and the shop was quiet, Eli lingered beside the bike. Keanu joined him, hands in his pockets. The air smelled faintly of oil and metal, warm and honest. I didn't think anyone saw me, Eli said softly. After my dad died, it felt like I disappeared. Keanu looked at him with quiet empathy. Sometimes the world overlooks the ones riding uphill, he said. But that's where real strength is. The ones who keep pushing forward when no one's watching. Eli met his gaze. You think my dad would be proud? Keanu smiled gently. He already is. The following morning, the workshop came alive again, with the scent of fresh paint and the hum of machinery. The sun spilled through the windows, bouncing off the polished surfaces of chrome frames. Eli arrived early, eager and determined. Marco grinned when he saw him. Didn't think you'd beat me here, kid, he said. Eli smiled, his hands already reaching for the wrench. Didn't want to waste a minute. Keanu stepped out from the back, a mug of coffee in hand, his hair still damp from the morning wash. That's how real builders start their day, he said. Not because they have to, but because they can't wait to continue. Together, they worked through the morning. Marco guided Eli as he aligned the chain sprocket. Tess painted the words "Ride Steady" across the frame, her brushstrokes slow and deliberate. Keanu watched quietly, occasionally lending a hand, always patient, always encouraging. By midday, the bike began to look transformed. It wasn't new, but it had character, its original soul still intact. The dents and welds were now part of its story. Eli ran his fingers across the smooth steel and whispered, "Dad, we did it." Keanu caught the moment and said softly, "He'd love that you said we instead of I." The boy smiled faintly. "He always said the best things are built together." Marco crossed his arms, nodding. "Smart man." As the afternoon stretched on, Keanu showed Eli how to tighten the final bolts and adjust the brakes. Every sound, every movement became a lesson not only in mechanics, but in patience, focus, and care. The boy moved slower now, not because he was tired, but because he wanted to get it right. When the last piece was fitted, Keanu stepped back. "She's ready," he said. "Not perfect, because perfect things can't tell stories." Eli stood beside his restored bike, eyes shining. It was no longer a relic of loss. It was a memory reborn. Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did this, Eli. Not me. I just reminded you what you already had." The boy looked up, his expression full of gratitude. "Thank you for seeing me." Keanu's answer was simple. "Always." The garage lights dimmed as the day ended, leaving the newly restored bike glowing softly in the fading light, a bridge between the past and everything waiting ahead. The hum of drills and the faint scent of engine oil filled the morning air at Arch Motorcycles. Eli and Marco were tightening the last bolts on the bike, while Tess outlined a new flame pattern on the side. Keanu was wiping his hands when the familiar sound of engines began to echo in the distance. It wasn't the gentle purr of hobby riders. It was rough, aggressive, and coming fast. Marco looked toward the open garage door. "That doesn't sound like customers," he muttered. Tess froze mid-stroke, her brush hovering above the frame. The engines grew louder until they filled the entire block, shaking the air. Eli looked up from his workbench, his heart skipping. He knew that sound. The same sound that had surrounded him on that empty Arizona road. A few seconds later, 4 bikes screeched to a stop outside the shop. The copper vultures had arrived: Blaze, Rex, Tank, and Milo. Dust swirled around their boots as they dismounted. Blaze pulled off his helmet, his eyes hidden again behind those mirrored shades. The group's presence cast a shadow across the open doorway. Marco set his wrench down slowly and stepped forward. "We're closed," he said cautiously. Blaze smirked. "Not here for a tune-up, old man." Keanu appeared from the back, calm and steady as ever. He didn't raise his voice or rush. He simply wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward them, his eyes meeting Blaze's with quiet authority. "You looking to make things right?" he asked, "or make things worse?" Blaze said nothing at first. Rex stepped forward, his tone sharp. "You made us look weak, Reeves. People talk. You know how it is." Keanu didn't flinch. He folded his arms, his posture unshaken. "I didn't make you look weak. Your choices did." Rex's jaw tightened, but Keanu's words carried no malice, only truth. "Strength," Keanu continued, "isn't measured by who you scare. It's by who you protect." Tank shifted uncomfortably. Even Milo looked unsure. Blaze stayed silent, his jaw clenched beneath the late morning light. From inside, Eli stepped into view, a smudge of grease across his cheek, a wrench in his hand. He blinked when he saw them but didn't hide. His restored bike gleamed on its stand behind him, nearly finished. Blaze froze. For a moment, the sound of engines, tools, and city noise faded. He saw the boy he'd taunted standing taller now, unafraid, confident. Something in his chest stirred a mix of shame and recognition. Eli spoke first. "Hi," he said simply. Blaze's reply was rough, almost uncertain. "Hey, kid." The words carried no threat this time, just awkward honesty. Keanu stepped between them, voice even. "If you came to prove something, here's your chance. Not with fists or fear, with work. You want to show real strength? Help us finish what you tried to break." Blaze met his gaze, then glanced at Eli's bike again. The silence stretched long before he finally muttered, Didn't mean to scare the boy. Keanu nodded. Then prove it. Blaze looked back at his crew. Rex frowned, clearly conflicted. You serious, boss? We came here to straighten things out, not play mechanic. Blaze turned toward him slowly. Maybe straightening things out means something different now. His voice had lost the hard edge it carried on the highway. He took off his gloves, the leather creasing in his hands. What do you need us to do? Keanu gave a small nod toward the half-finished bike. Grab a rag. The chrome needs polishing, and the chain needs realignment. Rex scoffed, but Tank elbowed him quietly. Come on, man! We owe the kid! Hesitation turned into motion as they stepped inside. The once hostile roar of their engines had been replaced by the gentle clatter of tools being picked up. Marco watched from the side, still cautious but curious. Didn't think I'd see the day the copper vultures turned into volunteers, he muttered under his breath. Blaze caught it and smirked faintly. Guess even vultures can learn to build instead of pick apart. Keanu moved closer to Eli, who stood still, watching in disbelief as the men who had once bullied him now worked beside him. You all right, kid? Keanu asked softly. Eli nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. I think so. It's just strange. Keanu smiled gently. Sometimes the road circles back for a reason. Maybe this is one of those times. Blaze crouched by the bike, inspecting the frame. You really rebuilt this thing? He asked. Eli nodded. With their help, he said, pointing to Marco, Tess, and Keanu. But most of the work's mine. Blaze gave a low whistle. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. Tess handed Blaze a small rag. Make yourself useful, then. He chuckled awkwardly but took it. As he polished the side panel, his reflection appeared in the metal. A man who, for the first time in years, didn't look like someone running from himself. Rex joined Marco by the tool chest, pretending not to care, but his hands moved carefully, mimicking Marco's technique. The sound inside the shop changed. Instead of hostility, it was the soft rhythm of cooperation, metal, cloth, breath, and humility. After an hour, the bike gleamed, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. The men stepped back, wiping sweat and grease from their hands. Eli stood beside it, his smile wide and genuine. Blaze looked at him with something close to respect. You know, kid, you ride with more guts than any of us ever did. Eli's cheeks reddened, but he stood a little taller. My dad said courage isn't loud, it's steady. Keanu looked between them, his expression unreadable but proud. He was right, he said. And today, you all proved it. Rex gave a small, reluctant grin. Never thought I'd hear Keanu Reeves telling me I did something right. Keanu shrugged. Then maybe it's the first of many surprises. The garage settled into an uneasy quiet after the laughter faded. The tension that once filled the air had shifted into something unfamiliar mutual respect. The men who had once mocked a child were now standing shoulder to shoulder with him, sweat and oil staining their hands. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of a cooling engine and the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Eli stepped forward, studying the gleaming bike. She's ready, he said proudly. Blaze glanced at Keanu, then at the boy, his voice softer than anyone expected. You did good, kid. Your old man would have been proud. Eli smiled, a shy but sincere grin. Thanks. And so would yours, if he saw you helping instead of fighting. The words caught Blaze off guard. He blinked, then let out a quiet laugh, half amusement, half humility. Guess you're right about that. Keanu looked around the workshop, his gaze passing from face to face. Looks like this shop's not just for fixing bikes, he said. It's for fixing people too. Tess nodded, setting down her brush. And for once, I don't mind the extra noise. Blaze leaned against a workbench, his voice low but thoughtful. You know, Reeves, when we showed up, I thought you were going to throw us out. But you didn't. You made us work for forgiveness. Keanu met his eyes. Forgiveness isn't free. It's earned through change. Blaze nodded slowly, the truth sinking in. He looked back at his crew. Maybe it's time the copper vultures learn to fly straight. That'd be a sight worth seeing. As the laughter returned, this time genuine, light, and easy, Eli turned to Keanu. "Can I ride it?" Keanu's grin widened. "Not yet. Tomorrow. Every great journey deserves a sunrise." The bikers began packing their tools, the energy in the room no longer hostile but familiar, like old friends after a long road trip. Blaze stepped toward Eli. Before leaving, placing something small in his hand, a silver keychain shaped like a wing. "Keep it," he said. "So you remember that even vultures can protect their own." Eli turned it over in his palm, touched. "Thanks, Blaze." As the group walked out into the twilight, their engines started again, not loud or arrogant, but steady and calm. The sound faded down the road, carried by the wind. Inside, Keanu and Eli stood beside the restored bike under the warm glow of the shop lights. "You see that?" Keanu asked quietly. "The road can change people if you give it a chance." Eli nodded, his voice soft but full of conviction. "And sometimes, people can change the road." Keanu smiled. "That's exactly right." The next morning, the workshop hummed with the sound of new beginnings. Sunlight streamed through the open doors, cutting across the haze of oil and dust. The once quiet garage now buzzed with an unexpected mix of voices and laughter. Where there had once been tension, there was now rhythm. The sight was something no one could have predicted: rough bikers and a 1-3-year-old boy working side by side under the calm guidance of Keanu Reeves. Blaze stood over the welding bench, sparks flying as he helped Rex fuse new steel bars for the bike's frame. Marco handed them tools, keeping a close eye but smiling as he watched the men handle the work with surprising care. "Not bad for guys who used to break things instead of fix them," Marco teased. Rex grinned beneath his welding mask. "Guess it's never too late to learn a trade." On the other side of the shop, Tess sat with Eli, sketching out the bike's new flame decals. Her pencil glided across the paper with confident strokes, forming wings that curled outward like rising smoke. "What do you think?" she asked, tilting the sketch toward him. Eli's eyes lit up. "They look like angel wings." "That's exactly what they are," Tess said. "Flames shaped like angels, something that shows both fire and grace." Eli nodded, smiling wide. "Can we paint them silver?" "Silver," Tess said, jotting it down. "Strong choice, kid." Meanwhile, Keanu stood near the workbench, arms crossed, quietly overseeing the process. He wasn't giving orders, he was guiding. Whenever someone made a mistake, he stepped in with patience. "Try easing up on the pressure," he told Rex, as he tightened a bolt too hard. "Machines respond to respect, not force." Rex laughed. "Guess that applies to people, too." "Exactly," Keanu said with a knowing look. By midday, the rhythm of work had settled into harmony. Blaze's rough laughter filled the air as Marco told old biker stories from his youth. Tess played music from a small speaker, and the steady beat mixed with the hum of engines. Eli moved between them, learning, helping, watching. He had never been part of anything like this before: a team, a family that built instead of broke. When Blaze took a short break, he wiped sweat from his brow and leaned against the wall beside Keanu. "You ever think you'd see us here, fixing a bike for a kid we scared half to death?" Keanu smiled faintly. "The road surprises you when you let it." Blaze chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, guess so." Inside the shop, the clang of tools and the smell of fresh paint filled the air. What had started as a place for machines had become something more: a place where people repaired themselves, one turn of a wrench at a time. As the day went on, the sounds inside the garage became almost musical. Sparks hissed from Blaze's welder, wrenches clicked in rhythm, and Tess's brush swished gently against the freshly painted metal. Eli worked between them all, his small hands tightening bolts, holding parts steady, and fetching tools without being asked. Every few minutes, someone called his name, not to mock him, but to thank him. Marco stepped back, admiring the collaboration. "I've seen a lot of builds," he said, "but never one that changed people like this." Blaze looked up from his work, his expression serious for once. "Guess you learn a lot when a 13-year-old reminds you what respect looks like." Keanu glanced over, hearing the remark but saying nothing. His quiet approval said more than any words could. He moved beside Eli and handed him a torque wrench. "You ready to try something new?" Eli nodded quickly. "Yeah, I think I got it." "Good," Keanu said. "Tighten this bolt here, but not too hard. Let the tool do the talking." Eli steadied the wrench and turned it slowly, feeling the pressure build until it clicked. He smiled. "Like that?" Keanu nodded. "Exactly. Precision, not power." Rex looked up from across the shop. "Man, wish someone told me that 20 years ago." Laughter spread through the room, easy and real. Even Tess chuckled as she cleaned her brush. "You probably wouldn't have listened," she teased. "True," Rex admitted. "But maybe I'd have fewer broken bones." The day passed quickly, hours melting into moments. Between tasks, stories began to surface, fragments of the lives behind the leather jackets. Blaze admitted that his younger brother had died in a crash years ago, and he hadn't been the same since. "I guess picking fights made me feel like I was still in control," he said quietly. Keanu listened without judgment, his voice calm. "Pain has its own engine. You just have to decide when to turn it off." Blaze nodded, staring at the glowing steel. "Never figured that out until now." Rex spoke next, his tone rough but honest. "I ride to outrun mistakes," he said. "Debt, guilt, bad choices. Feels like the road's the only place that doesn't judge." Keanu leaned against the workbench. "The road doesn't judge because it knows every rider's got a story. What matters is where you're heading, not where you've been." Eli watched them, all quietly, realizing that strength didn't come from intimidation or toughness. It came from honesty. The men he once feared were just people carrying heavy stories, learning how to put themselves back together again, piece by piece, just like his bike. By late afternoon, the sun dipped low, spilling golden light through the open doors. The bike was nearly complete now, its silver angel wing flames shining faintly under the glow. Keanu ran a hand along the finished frame, his voice soft. "Looks like she's almost ready." Eli smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "She's perfect." Keanu shook his head gently. "Not perfect, Eli, just alive." By evening, the shop was bathed in soft fluorescent light. The clinking of wrenches gave way to the hiss of soda cans and the smell of hot pizza. The crew gathered around a makeshift table made of 2 workbenches pushed together, their laughter echoing against the concrete walls. What had started as a confrontation had turned into a brotherhood rough around the edges, but real. Eli sat between Blaze and Keanu, his plate stacked high with pepperoni slices. Tess poured root beer into paper cups while Marco leaned back in his chair, shaking his head in amusement. "I've seen a lot of rides start rough," Marco said, "but none end up like this." Rex raised his can. "To the kid who rides harder than half the bikers I know." Eli blushed, grinning. "I just ride steady, like my dad said." Blaze smirked. "Kid, you ride with more heart than most of us ever did." The words hit everyone differently because they were true. For the first time, the tough men who'd once mocked others found themselves learning from a boy half their size. Keanu watched quietly, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "Heart's what keeps the wheels turning," he said. "Engines rust, paint fades, but heart keeps the road alive." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only comes when walls have come down. Outside, the street was dark, except for the faint glow of passing headlights. The steady hum of the city filled the gaps between their laughter. Blaze leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "You know," he said, "I think my brother would have liked this. He used to say, riding wasn't about the speed, it was about finding peace." Keanu looked at him carefully. "He'd be proud that you remembered." Blaze nodded, swallowing hard. "Maybe I'm finally ready to ride for something instead of running from it." Tess raised her cup. "Then let's call this what it is, a rebuild. Not just for bikes." Everyone clinked their cups together, the sound sharp and clear against the quiet hum of the workshop. Eli looked toward the helmet sitting on the counter, the same one Keanu had given him, with the silver phoenix carved into its side. The reflection of the group flickered across its surface. "Almost time," Keanu said softly, following Eli's gaze. Eli turned to him. "Time for what?" Keanu smiled knowingly. "For you to take the ride you built." The boy's eyes widened, excitement flickering beneath his calm expression. The others nodded in agreement. It wasn't just a test, it was a rite of passage. As the night deepened, laughter echoed once more through the garage, carrying the warmth of shared redemption. The unlikely brotherhood had been forged not by power or pride, but by respect, patience, and the steady rhythm of forgiveness. Morning sunlight spilled through the open garage door, coating the concrete floor in gold. The smell of new paint and metal hung in the air, mixed with the faint aroma of fresh coffee. Everyone gathered near the workbench, where Keanu stood with something cradled in his hands. The group fell quiet. The hum of the city faded, replaced by that shared stillness that always came before a defining moment. Eli wiped his hands nervously on his jeans, his heart pounding with anticipation. Blaze and the other bikers stood off to the side, their expressions unreadable but calm. Tess leaned against the counter, a small smile tugging at her lips. Marco crossed his arms and nodded to Keanu. "You gonna show him?" Keanu looked at Eli, his eyes warm but steady. "You've worked hard for this," he said. "Every wrench turn, every late night, every scrape and doubt, it all led here." He lifted the helmet so everyone could see. It was matte black, smooth and flawless, engraved in silver letters that shimmered softly under the light. "Ride with pride." The silver phoenix symbol gleamed just above the words, its wings stretched wide. Gasps and quiet murmurs rippled through the room. The helmet wasn't flashy, it was powerful in its simplicity. It looked like something built to last, not to impress. Keanu stepped forward, holding it out to Eli. "This isn't about the bike," he said quietly. "It's about knowing who you are when others try to tell you different." Eli's hands trembled as he took it. The weight of the helmet felt heavier than he expected, as though it carried every moment that had led him here. The laughter, the pain, the forgiveness. Keanu gently helped him lower it onto his head. It fit perfectly, snug and solid. The boy lifted his chin, feeling taller somehow. Blaze broke the silence first. "Looks right on you, kid," he said, voice gruff but sincere. Rex grinned. "Better than any fancy chrome." Eli laughed nervously. "It feels real." Keanu rested a hand on his shoulder. "It is. You built your way here. You earned it." Marco clapped his hands together. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's see what that bike can do." Tess rolled her stool back from the table. "Don't scratch my paint job," she teased, but her eyes gleamed with pride. Keanu motioned toward the door. "Let's take it outside. Every bike deserves its first breath of open air." The group followed as Eli pushed his restored bicycle toward the sunlight. The tires gleamed, the metal polished smooth, the silver angel wing flames shining faintly. It no longer looked like a relic, it looked like freedom on two wheels. Outside, the rumble of engines began to build again, not as a threat this time, but as an anthem. Blaze, Rex, Tank, and Milo lined up their motorcycles in a row, each rider glancing toward Eli with quiet respect. The tension of their first meeting was gone, replaced by something stronger: unity. Keanu stood beside the boy, the sunlight reflecting in his calm eyes. "You ready?" Eli nodded, gripping the handlebars. "Yeah," he said. "I'm ready." The engines roared to life one by one, filling the air with a deep, rolling thunder that echoed down the street. But this time, it wasn't intimidation, it was rhythm. The sound pulsed with unity, not chaos. Keanu gave a short nod, and Blaze revved his bike lightly, signaling the others to hold back. Eli climbed onto his restored bicycle, hands firm on the handlebars. The black helmet with silver engraving caught the morning light, the words "Ride with Pride" gleaming like truth. The boy inhaled deeply, feeling the vibration of engines behind him. For the first time in his life, the sound didn't scare him, it carried him. Keanu's calm voice cut through the roar. "Take the lead, Eli. This time, the road belongs to you." The boy pushed off, the tires rolling over the smooth asphalt. The sunlight warmed his back, and the wind brushed against his arms. Every pedal turned smoother than the last, every motion surer. His balance was perfect, his heart steady. The laughter that used to mock him had turned into the rhythm of engines following his lead. The bikers moved in formation behind him, their massive motorcycles riding slow and steady. It was a strange sight, 4 hardened men following a 13-year-old boy on a bicycle. But to everyone watching, it wasn't strange at all. It was right. Tess stepped outside the garage, shielding her eyes from the light. Marco joined her, leaning against the doorway. "Would you look at that?" Marco said quietly. "The toughest riders in town trailing behind a kid like disciples." Tess smiled softly. "Not disciples," she said. "Brothers." Out on the road, Eli picked up a little more speed. His smile widened as he felt the wind rush stronger against his face. He looked over his shoulder briefly. Blaze was there, riding steady, nodding in encouragement. For the first time since his father died, Eli didn't feel small. He felt seen. Keanu followed a few paces back, watching carefully but not interfering. This was Eli's ride, his moment to own what he'd built with his hands and heart. The group rode together past old storefronts, through the quiet main street, and toward the open stretch that led out of town. People stepped out of shops, shading their eyes, watching as the line of bikers rolled past. A woman with her child smiled and waved. 2 old men outside a diner raised their coffee cups in salute. They didn't know the full story, but they could feel it, the power of redemption moving through that formation. Eli turned toward the rising slope ahead, his legs pushing harder. The bike glided smooth, every part working perfectly, every sound in sync. He heard Keanu's voice echo in his mind. "The road doesn't care what you ride, only how you ride it." He wasn't proving himself anymore. He was just riding. Free. The Prove to Stad group reached the edge of town, where the highway opened wide beneath the morning sky. The air smelled of sage and heat, the kind of scent that only desert roads carry. The engines behind Eli softened to a slow, rhythmic hum, their sound no longer leading the moment but framing it. Keanu rode alongside for a stretch, the calm of his presence steadying everything around them. Eli pedaled faster, his legs moving with strength he didn't know he had. The wind roared past his ears, carrying the laughter of the men who once frightened him. It wasn't cruel anymore, it was light, alive, full of joy. For the first time, the road wasn't a place to survive. It was a place to belong. Blaze rode up behind him and shouted over the sound of the engines. "Keep that head high, kid!" Eli glanced back and grinned. "Always!" The boy leaned forward, letting the air lift the edges of his shirt. The helmet's silver letters gleamed like a promise. Ride with pride. In that instant, he wasn't the scared boy on a broken bike anymore. He was a rider. One of them. They cruised for miles, the desert stretching endlessly ahead. Cars pulled to the side as they passed, people slowing down to take in the sight, a young boy leading a convoy of bikers, the sunlight catching his silver-painted wings. It was the kind of scene that stayed in memory long after it ended. When they finally turned back toward the shop, Eli coasted to a stop in front of the open garage. The bikers pulled in behind him, shutting off their engines one by one. The sudden quiet felt sacred. The only sound left was the soft creak of Eli's bike chain and the beating of his heart. Keanu climbed off his motorcycle and walked over. He reached out, steadying the handlebars with one hand. "You did it," he said simply. Eli looked up at him, cheeks flushed from the ride. "I didn't fall once." Keanu smiled. "That's because you weren't just holding balance, you found it." Blaze and the others gathered around. "Kid," Blaze said, shaking his head with a smile, "I've seen men twice your age freeze up on the open road. You just rode like you were born for it." Eli looked down shyly, tracing the engraved phoenix on his helmet. "I wasn't scared this time." Keanu nodded, his voice quiet but proud. "That's what pride feels like, not arrogance, just peace." The group fell silent for a moment, each of them taking in what had just happened. The sun dipped lower, throwing long shadows across the floor of the shop. Keanu placed his hand gently on the bike's frame and said, "For once, the road held no fear, only freedom." And for everyone there, it was true. The boy had found his freedom, and the men had found their redemption, all on the same stretch of road. The shop grew quiet after sunset. The others had gone home, their laughter fading down the street with the sound of retreating engines. Only the smell of oil and paint lingered, mixing with the cooling night air. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Blaze stood alone by Eli's restored bike. His gloves hung from his back pocket, his hands resting on the handlebars, as if the machine could somehow answer the questions stirring in his mind. The silver angel wing flames shimmered faintly under the lights, and for a long moment, he just stared. Keanu stepped out from the office, drying his hands with an oil-stained rag. "Didn't think you'd still be here," he said, his voice calm. Blaze didn't turn around, couldn't leave yet. He hesitated, then added, "My brother died on a road like this. Crashed out near Prescott. We were supposed to ride together that day, but I was too busy showing off." Keanu stayed quiet, letting him speak. Blaze's voice softened. "After that, I stopped riding for joy. It just became noise, a way to fill the silence." He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the bike. "Guess I forgot what we ride for." Keanu walked closer and held out the rag. "Then, start remembering." Blaze looked at him, uncertain. Keanu nodded toward the bike. "Clean it. Every time you wipe away the dirt, you think about what matters. Not the crowds, not the noise, the road, the people, the purpose." Blaze took the rag, his jaw tightening. Without a word, he began to wipe the chrome slowly, carefully. The rag left faint streaks of oil, but each pass seemed to smooth something out inside him, too. Keanu leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, watching. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. After a few minutes, Blaze spoke again, his tone quieter. "You know, when I saw the kid today, it reminded me of when I first started riding. I had an old Honda that barely ran. My brother helped me fix it. He said the same thing you told the boy, that the road doesn't care what you ride." He let out a low, bittersweet laugh. "Guess I needed to hear it again." Keanu smiled faintly. "Sometimes the road gives us mirrors, not maps." Blaze stopped wiping, glancing up. "Mirrors, huh?" Keanu nodded. "To show us what we've become and what we could be again." Blaze stared down at the polished surface of the bike. For the first time in years, he didn't see anger staring back at him. He saw peace. He saw a reason to keep going. He folded the rag and set it on the seat, his hands lingering for a moment. Then, without saying anything, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his Copper Vulture's club patch, black and gold, frayed from years on the road. He looked at it one last time, then placed it gently on the bike seat. "For respect," he said softly. Keanu stood quietly beside him, his eyes falling on the worn patch, resting on the seat. The symbol that once stood for pride and intimidation now looked like something else, like an offering. Blaze didn't say another word. He just kept his hand there for a moment, then stepped back, his breath unsteady, but lighter than before. "That's a good start," Keanu said softly. "You don't have to talk it out. The road listens better when you let your actions do the talking." Blaze gave a small nod. "Talking never fixed much for me anyway." Keanu placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "It will now, because it's coming from the right place." The garage door creaked as a cool breeze rolled through, stirring the smell of oil and paint. The air felt different, cleaner somehow. Blaze reached for his helmet, pausing for a final look at the bike. "Kid built a good one," he said. "It's got heart." Keanu smiled. "Just like the hands that helped finish it." Blaze chuckled softly. "Maybe so." He turned toward the exit, his heavy boots echoing on the floor. But before he could leave, he heard footsteps behind him. Eli stood at the entrance, still in his work shirt, his hair messy from the long day. He had come back to grab his backpack but stopped when he saw Blaze standing there. "You're still here?" he asked carefully. Blaze hesitated. "Yeah, Just wanted to check on your bike. Make sure she's ready." Eli noticed the rag on the seat, the faint gleam of freshly polished chrome, and the club patch folded neatly beside it. His eyes widened. "You cleaned it?" Blaze nodded slowly. "Figured it was time I did something right." Eli stepped closer, his voice small but genuine. "Does this mean we're friends now?" Blaze laughed, the sound low and warm. "Better," he said, crouching down so they were eye level. "We're road family. That means when you ride, you don't ride alone." Eli smiled, the kind that carried gratitude too big for words. "Thanks, Blaze." Blaze looked at him with the faintest trace of pride. "Keep that helmet close, kid. Don't let anyone tell you what kind of rider you're supposed to be." "I won't," Eli said firmly. Blaze stood up, gave a quick nod to Keanu, and started toward his bike parked outside. "See you on the road, Reeves." "Count on it," Keanu replied. The engine roared to life, but even that sound felt different now. Steady, purposeful, free of anger. Blaze rode off down the quiet street, the taillight fading into the dark. Eli turned to Keanu. "He really changed, didn't he?" Keanu looked at the open garage door where the sound of the motorcycle had vanished. "He just remembered who he was," he said. "That's all any of us ever need to do." Eli picked up the old patch, holding it in his hands. "For respect," he whispered. Keanu smiled at the words. "Exactly." The boy placed the patch on the shelf beside his tools, right under a small metal sign that read, "Ride with Pride." The light from above caught it perfectly, reflecting the symbol of forgiveness earned, not given. 3 days later, the sound of engines rolled softly through the morning air. The sun was barely up, spilling golden light over the quiet streets. It wasn't a gang this time. It was a convoy of purpose. Keanu led the ride, dressed in his simple black jacket and worn boots, his motorcycle gleaming under the early light. Behind him rode Blaze and his crew, their once threatening presence now calm and steady. And between them all, leading the center line, was Eli on his restored bike, his helmet glinting with the silver words, "Ride with Pride." A few shop owners paused while sweeping their sidewalks, their eyes widening at the sight. Bikers, riding slow, in formation, escorting a young boy on a bicycle. It was something no one had ever seen before. Some smiled. Others just stood in silence, sensing there was more to this story than the machines and leather jackets could show. Keanu kept a careful pace, his eyes occasionally shifting to check on Eli. The boy pedaled with perfect rhythm, his shoulders squared, his back straight. He wasn't the scared kid from the desert road anymore. Each turn of the wheels looked deliberate, confident. The wind caught the edges of his shirt, and the faint dust from the road rose behind him like a ribbon. They passed the old gas station where Eli's father used to work, the place with the faded red sign and the squeaky window shutters. Eli slowed slightly, glancing at it as they rode by. For a moment, he could almost see his father there again, waving from the pump, covered in grease but smiling. He felt Keanu's gaze and nodded softly, as if telling him, "I remember." The convoy turned down Maple Street, heading toward the heart of town. More people began to notice them: families, store clerks, joggers. Some pulled out phones, snapping pictures, but most just stood in awe. There was something powerful in the sight of those rumbling bikes following quietly behind the four, boy who once trembled at their engines. When they reached the intersection near the school, Eli slowed again. The sound of laughter drifted from the playground. A few kids who had once mocked his old bike stood at the fence, frozen. Their eyes went wide as they saw him riding past, head high, flanked by the same bikers who used to terrorize the streets. Eli lifted a hand slightly in greeting, not to brag, not to boast, but to say he was still here, still riding. The kids waved back, no teasing this time, only quiet respect. Keanu smiled faintly at the sight. This was what redemption looked like. Not shouted, not forced, but lived. Blaze rode a few feet behind, his eyes on the road, the faintest smile breaking through his rugged expression. The roar of his engine softened, almost reverent. The group made their way toward the town square, the heart of their little community. There, painted across a long brick wall, stood a mural. a tribute to fallen riders. The paint was chipped in places, but the names still glowed under the morning sun. The group pulled up quietly beside the mural. The engines cut off one by one until the only sounds were the creak of cooling metal and the rustle of the wind. The air carried the faint scent of motor oil, dust, and morning dew. For a long moment, no one spoke. The wall before them was filled with painted helmets, names, and small messages left by loved ones, each one a story, frozen in color. Eli climbed off his bike, removing his helmet slowly. He stood beside Keanu, looking up at the mural. Near the bottom was a faded space, an empty patch of brick that had been left blank for years. Blaze dismounted his motorcycle and stepped forward too, his boots heavy against the pavement. "Didn't know this was here," he said quietly. "We used to ride past this street every week." Keanu nodded. "Sometimes the road shows you what you missed when you weren't looking." Marco arrived in a truck carrying a small crate of paint, cans, and brushes. "Thought we might need this," he said, setting it down gently. Tess joined him, handing Keanu a fine-tipped brush. "You said there was someone missing from this wall," she reminded him. Keanu looked at Eli. "Your father's name belongs here." Eli's breath caught. "My dad? But he wasn't famous or anything. He just fixed cars." Keanu knelt beside the wall and opened a can of white paint. "Doesn't take fame to be remembered, just heart." He dipped the brush and began to paint the letters slowly and carefully, his strokes deliberate and steady. Thomas Turner. A man who rode with love. Eli watched in silence, his hands trembling slightly. The words came alive under the rising sun, gleaming softly against the rough brick. Tess covered her mouth, touched by the simplicity of it. Blaze lowered his head respectfully. Even Rex, who usually cracked jokes at every pause, stood quiet. When Keanu finished, he stepped back and handed the brush to Eli. "Go ahead," he said. "Make it yours." Eli dipped the brush again and added a small line beneath the name, a heart and 2 angel wings, just like the ones painted on his bike. He whispered, "For you, Dad." Keanu placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "He's part of every mile now." Blaze cleared his throat, his voice rough but honest. "He'd be proud of you, kid. You made his road your own." Eli looked at him, smiling faintly. "You too, Blaze. You're different now." Blaze chuckled softly. "Maybe I just needed a kid to remind me how to ride straight." Keanu turned toward the rest of the crew. "Let's give him a ride he'll never forget." The men nodded. Engines roared to life once more, echoing through the square. But this time, the sound wasn't harsh, it was like music. Eli climbed back onto his bike, placing his helmet firmly on his head. As the convoy rolled forward again, the mural stood behind them, bright and new, bearing the name of a man who rode with love. The next morning, the world woke up to a story that no one expected. Somewhere between the dusty roads and quiet town streets, someone had filmed the entire ride, the boy leading a line of bikers, the silver flames glinting on his restored bike, and Keanu Reeves riding beside him. The video began spreading before sunrise. By noon, it had reached every corner of social media. Millions watched the clip again and again. The sound of engines rolling slowly behind a child became a symbol of something larger: redemption, unity, and the power of kindness. News anchors replayed it with awe in their voices. Headlines appeared everywhere. Hollywood star leads unlikely ride for boy's late father, and bikers redeemed by compassion. The Keanu Reeves story. In the comments, people wrote about how it made them cry, how they wished more heroes looked like this. The moment that began as a small act on a back road had become something that moved the world. By afternoon, vans with satellite dishes crowded the front of Arch motorcycles. Cameras flashed. Journalists stood by the door with microphones, calling out questions as soon as Keanu appeared. Eli stood beside him, wearing his Ride with Pride helmet, both nervous and proud. "Mr. Reeves," one reporter asked, "what inspired you to get involved with this boy's story?" Keanu smiled faintly, the calm in his voice cutting through the noise. "No comment," he said softly. "Just kindness." The reporters looked at each other, waiting for more, but that was all he gave them. The statement replayed across every network within the hour. The simplicity of it made it more powerful than any speech could have been. Inside the shop, Blaze paced back and forth, clearly uneasy. "Man, this is getting out of hand," he muttered. "We didn't ask for cameras." Keanu walked in, wiping his hands with a rag. "They'll leave soon. Let them tell their story. Ours is already written." Rex grinned. "You're not worried about fame?" Keanu shook his head. "Fame fades. Purpose doesn't." Blaze stopped pacing, finally exhaling. "So, what now?" he asked. "We just go back to fixing bikes and pretending none of this happened?" Keanu set down the rag and looked at each of them. "No," he said quietly. "We keep riding, but with purpose." Marco leaned against the bench. "What kind of purpose are we talking about?" Keanu's expression softened. "The kind that gives kids like Eli a reason to believe again." He gestured toward the corner of the garage, where Eli's bike sat proudly, shining under the lights. "That bike started as a memory and became a miracle. I think we can build more of those." Blaze crossed his arms. "You're thinking of starting something, aren't you?" Keanu nodded. "A new project. Something we can all put our hands and hearts into." Tess stepped forward, curious. "What's it called?" Keanu smiled. "Ride with Heart." Within days, the Ride with Heart idea became more than a promise. It became a movement. Keanu set up a small team inside the workshop, converting a corner of the garage into a dedicated workspace for rebuilding donated bikes. Tess designed a logo, a silver heart wrapped around two wings, and Blaze helped paint it across the garage wall. The words underneath read, "Restoring bikes, restoring hope." Donations began pouring in almost immediately. Letters arrived from parents, veterans, and kids who had lost someone they loved. One came from a mother in Nevada whose husband used to take their son riding before he passed away. She wrote, "My boy still keeps his dad's helmet by the door. Maybe one day he'll find someone to ride with again." Eli read every letter that came in. He insisted on helping Keanu and the others sort through the mail, organizing them into neat piles. "We can help them all, right?" he asked one evening. Keanu smiled gently. "One bike at a time, Eli. That's how real change works." Blaze watched from across the shop, his arms folded but his heart softening. "Kid's got fire," he muttered to Rex. Rex nodded. "Yeah, and he's spreading it faster than any of us did with our engines." Soon, volunteers started showing up, bikers from nearby towns, mechanics, even high school students. The once quiet garage turned into a symphony of clinking tools, laughter, and purpose. Eli took on the role of apprentice, learning how to sand down rust, change gears, and rebuild chains. Each finished bike wasn't just a machine, it was a story reborn. One afternoon, a local reporter returned to the workshop, microphone in hand. "Mr. Reeves," she asked, "Ride with Heart has already restored 9 bikes for kids across the state. What do you think makes this project special?" Keanu glanced at Eli, who was busy polishing a chrome handlebar, then looked back at her. "Because it's not about charity," he said softly. "It's about connection. Every person who rides one of these bikes carries a story, and sometimes fixing a bike helps fix a heart." The clip aired that night and spread across news outlets. Keanu's words echoed everywhere, shared millions of times. People began sending in their own bikes, asking for them to be restored in memory of loved ones. Blaze and his crew, once feared across the county, became local heroes, helping build, deliver, and ride alongside the kids who received the bikes. Eli quickly became the youngest volunteer, showing up early and staying late. He kept a small notebook filled with the names of every child who received a bike and what their stories were. One page read, "Jasmine, age 10. Her dad was a firefighter. She likes purple and stars." Another read, "Connor, age 12, lost his mom. Wants to ride to the ocean." Keanu saw the list one evening and smiled. "You're keeping the heart of this alive," he told Eli. Eli shrugged, pretending to brush off the praise. "I just don't want anyone to ride alone." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's the mission." Outside, the sun dipped low. reflecting off rows of freshly polished bikes lined up by the curb. Blaze stood beside his Harley, watching them all. "Never thought I'd see the day when the copper vultures became the good guys," he said with a laugh. Keanu chuckled. "You didn't change who you are. You just remembered why you started." Blaze smiled, kicking at the dirt. "Guess that's enough." Keanu looked toward Eli, still working under the soft glow of the lights. "It's more than enough," he said quietly. "It's the beginning of something bigger." The weeks that followed turned into a rhythm of purpose. Every Saturday morning, while most kids slept in, Eli was already at the workshop, sweeping floors, wiping down tables, and lining up tools in perfect rows. The Ride with Heart Foundation had grown quickly, but Eli treated every job, no matter how small, like it mattered. He wore his black work gloves proudly, the same pair Keanu had given him the first week they started the program. Keanu usually arrived a little later, coffee in hand, nodding in quiet approval at the sight of Eli already working. "You're making us all look lazy," he'd joke softly. Eli grinned. "Just trying to keep up." Under Keanu's patient guidance, Eli learned more than mechanics. He learned how to listen to a bike's rhythm, how to tell when a machine needed care, and how to work with calm precision instead of rushing. "Mechanics and life are the same," Keanu told him one afternoon. "You fix what's broken, one part at a time. No shortcuts." Eli nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's kind of like people too, huh?" Keanu smiled, faintly. "Exactly." By noon, the shop filled with familiar sounds, the clang of tools, the hum of engines, the occasional burst of laughter. Tess worked on decals, while Blaze and Rex tuned an old motorcycle donated by a retired soldier. Marco supervised from the corner, pretending to be grumpy but secretly proud. Each weekend, more volunteers joined. Some were riders, some were families. Others were simply people who had seen the viral video and wanted to help. The workshop had become more than a garage, it was a sanctuary. Every person who entered felt part of something bigger. Eli's confidence grew with every passing week. He no longer looked down when he talked to adults. He started teaching younger volunteers how to polish parts, how to oil a chain, how to sand a rusted frame. Kids listened to him because he spoke with kindness, not pride. One Saturday, a small boy wandered into the shop, clutching a worn baseball cap in his hands. He couldn't have been more than 10. His name was Noah, and his mother explained that his father was serving overseas in the military. The boy barely spoke, his eyes darting nervously between the bikers and the tools. Eli approached him with a smile. "Hey, you like bikes?" Noah shrugged. "My dad used to. I just don't know much about them." Eli picked up a small silver wrench from the workbench and placed it in Noah's hand. "This is the first tool I ever used," he said. "My dad taught me how. He said every tool can fix something or someone if you know how to use it right." Noah looked down at the wrench, then back up at Eli. For the first time that day, he smiled. Keanu, watching from across the shop, said nothing. But there was pride in his eyes, the kind that didn't need words. From that day on, Noah became a regular at the shop. He followed Eli everywhere, mimicking his movements and asking questions about every tool he saw. The other volunteers joked that Eli had his own apprentice now, and for the first time, Eli understood what it meant to guide someone else. He showed Noah how to wipe down chains, how to line up bolts, and how to listen when a bike spoke through its hum. Blaze noticed the bond forming between them. "Looks familiar," he said one afternoon, nodding toward Keanu. "Guess the teacher's got himself a student." Keanu smiled faintly. "That's how it should be. Kindness is only real when it keeps moving." By the end of each Saturday, the two boys would sit on the curb outside the shop, eating sandwiches from Tess's lunch cooler. Noah talked about his dad's letters from overseas, and Eli shared stories about his father fixing the same old bike they'd rebuilt together. They didn't talk about loss as something sad. It became a bridge that connected them. One afternoon, while the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the asphalt, Eli handed Noah the small wrench again. "Keep it," he said. "You'll need it someday." Noah looked down surprised. "But it's yours." Eli shook his head. "My dad gave it to me to fix things. You'll do the same." Every tool can fix something or someone if you care enough. Noah held it tightly, his eyes bright. I'll take good care of it. Keanu, who had been leaning against his motorcycle watching the exchange, approached quietly. You learned the most important rule, he said softly. Eli tilted his head. What's that? When someone gives you kindness, Keanu replied, pass it on. Eli smiled. Guess I did. Keanu nodded. That's how the road stays alive. As the weeks passed, the foundation flourished. Each restored bike carried a story, painted names, engraved initials, symbols of love and remembrance. Word spread across neighboring towns, and soon Ride with Heart became a network of workshops, each one helping kids heal through the sound of spinning wheels. Eli's confidence grew into quiet leadership. He no longer felt like the boy rescued from cruelty. He had become a mentor himself. He treated every bike like a person, speaking to it softly as he worked. Volunteers followed his calm example. One day, Blaze entered the shop with an idea. We should organize a community ride, he said. Let the kids lead. Remind people what this whole thing's about. Keanu glanced at Eli, who was wiping grease off his hands. What do you think? Eli smiled. I think it's time. Blaze grinned. Then let's make it happen. That night, as the shop lights dimmed and the engines cooled, Keanu stood by the doorway, watching Eli and Noah lock up the tool cabinets. Their laughter filled the empty space where silence used to live. He felt something settle deep in his chest, a rare kind of peace that only comes when a circle completes itself. The boy he once defended had grown into the kind of person who didn't need saving anymore. He had become the one who saved others. The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the shop windows in shades of amber and gold. The familiar hum of engines approached from down the street, not loud or menacing, but calm and steady. Keanu was tightening a chain on one of the newly restored bikes when the sound made him pause. He looked up, recognizing the rhythm of the lead motorcycle even before it came into view. Blaze pulled up to the curb, dust swirling behind his tires. He cut the engine and swung a leg over the seat, the sound of his boots crunching on the gravel echoing softly. But something was different this time. His jacket bore a new patch, a circular emblem embroidered in white and silver. It read, "The Riders of Honor." Keanu's brow lifted slightly. "That's new," he said. Blaze smiled, unzipping his jacket to show it fully. "Yeah, the Copper Vultures are done. I shut it down last month." His voice carried both pride and humility. "We were tearing through towns like ghosts chasing noise. I figured it was time we stopped scaring people and started helping them instead." Keanu nodded, setting down his wrench. "What made you decide that?" Blaze chuckled softly. "You did, man. You and that kid. That day on the road, it stuck with me. I kept thinking about what you said, how the road doesn't care what you ride, only how you ride it." He looked down, shaking his head. "Guess I finally understood what it meant." Keanu stepped closer, extending his hand. "You didn't follow me, Blaze. You found your way." Blaze hesitated for a moment before taking the handshake. It was firm, steady, more than a greeting. It was an acknowledgement. "Feels different now," Blaze admitted. "We call ourselves the Riders of Honor. We stop for stranded travelers, patch up tires, deliver supplies to folks living off the highways. No colors, no rules, no fear, just good work." Keanu smiled. "Sounds like you traded power for purpose." Blaze grinned. "And it feels better than any roar of an engine." The two men shared a long look, one of quiet understanding and mutual respect. In the background, the soft murmur of conversation drifted from inside the shop where volunteers worked on another round of donated bikes. The smell of oil and metal mixed with the sweetness of fresh paint, a reminder that even things once broken could shine again. Eli stepped out from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. His helmet, still engraved with "Ride with Pride," hung loosely from his arm. "Blaze?" he said in surprise, his face lighting up. "You came back." Blaze turned, smiling broadly. "You kidding? Couldn't stay away. Heard you're teaching the next generation now." Eli laughed. "Trying my best." Keanu looked between them. a quiet sense of pride in his eyes. Looks like we've all learned how to ride for the right reasons. Blaze leaned against the doorway, taking in the sight of the workshop. The walls were covered with photos of smiling kids next to their rebuilt bikes, each one marked with a silver heart decal, the symbol of Ride with Heart. Tess was sketching new designs at her table, while Marco adjusted the alignment on a recently donated Harley. The place was alive, not with chaos, but with purpose. Blaze whistled softly. "You've turned this place into something special," he said. Keanu smiled, leaning against a workbench. "We just gave people a space to remember what they stand for." Blaze nodded, looking around. "You know, I used to think riding was about being untouchable. Speed, noise, power, it all made me feel alive. But it was hollow. Helping people on the road, that filled something I didn't know was empty." Keanu folded his arms, his voice quiet but firm. "That's because real strength isn't about being feared. It's about being needed." Blaze looked down, letting the words sink in. "Yeah," he said softly. "You're right." He lifted his gaze, his eyes glinting with gratitude. "Guess I should thank you for not giving up on me that day." Keanu shook his head. "I didn't fix you, Blaze. You chose the turn. You're the one who took it." Blaze smiled. "Maybe. But you showed me the signpost." The sound of small footsteps interrupted them. Eli walked over, the helmet under his arm gleaming under the light. He was taller now, his shoulders broader, his movements more sure. "You two talking about signs again?" he teased. Blaze laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "Still sharp as ever, huh?" Eli grinned. "You taught me how to ride, but more than that, you taught me how to stand tall." Keanu's eyes softened as he looked at him. "Then you're ready for your own road." Eli blinked. "My own road?" Keanu nodded. "You've already started paving it. The way you help others, the way you lead, that's what riding's really about. The road belongs to those who use it to lift others up." Blaze crossed his arms, smiling with pride. "He's got it, Keanu. Kid's got more heart than any rider I've met." Eli blushed. "I just learned from the best." Keanu chuckled. "Then you'll do even better." For a moment, all three stood there, framed by the warm light spilling from the open garage. The late afternoon breeze carried the faint scent of asphalt and pine from the nearby highway. The sound of distant engines echoed like a heartbeat, steady, constant, alive. Blaze reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was an embroidered patch, freshly made. He handed it to Eli. "Here, for when you start your own ride." Eli unfolded it carefully. The patch was simple white stitching on black fabric, shaped like a heart with wings. It read, "Honor the road." Eli looked up, speechless. Blaze, this is Blaze, raised a hand. "You don't have to say anything. Just earn it, the way we did." Eli smiled wide, his eyes shimmering with emotion. "I will." Keanu rested a hand on Blaze's shoulder. "Looks like you've come full circle." Blaze nodded, a rare peace settling over his face. "Yeah, and it feels good." Keanu turned toward the open road just beyond the garage. The horizon glowed with the last light of day, long stretches of pavement leading into the unknown. "Then let's keep it going," he said. "Every mile, every rider, every story, it's all part of the same journey." Blaze smiled, sliding on his helmet. "Lead the way." Keanu looked back at Eli, who was already putting on his Ride with Pride helmet, standing taller than ever. "Not this time," Keanu said. "He leads." Eli grinned, lifting his bike upright. "Then let's ride." And as the engines rumbled to life again, the three of them rolled out into the fading light. Teacher, rider, and student bound, not by the road behind them, but by the road still waiting ahead. A few weeks after Blaze's visit, the workshop had settled into its familiar rhythm again. Engines rumbled, wrenches clanked, and the scent of oil mixed with paint and warm sunlight streaming through the open doors. Eli was in his usual spot by the tool bench, polishing a chrome handlebar while humming softly to himself. That evening, his mother, Sarah Turner, arrived at the shop with a small box in her hands. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. "Eli," she said gently, I was cleaning out the attic this morning and found something your dad left behind. Eli set down the rag and turned to her, curious. Something for me? She nodded and opened the box carefully. Inside was a sealed, yellowed envelope with Eli's name written across it in his father's handwriting. The ink had faded, but the words were still strong. For my son, when he's ready to ride. Eli stared at it for a long time before speaking. He wrote this before he died? Sarah nodded. He must have known you'd need it someday. Keanu, hearing their voices, walked over quietly, wiping his hands on a towel. Blaze, Marco, and Tess looked up from their work, sensing the weight of the moment. Eli took the envelope in both hands. For a moment, he hesitated, as if afraid to break the seal and let the past spill out. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Take your time, he said softly. Letters like that find you when they're meant to. Eli exhaled slowly, then slid a finger under the flap. The paper tore with a faint whisper, and he unfolded the letter with trembling hands. His father's words were neat and steady, the kind of handwriting that spoke of patience and care. He began to read aloud, his voice unsteady at first, but growing stronger with each line. Son, if you're reading this, it means you've grown into the young man I always hoped you'd be. Life on the road, whether it's with wheels or with choices, will test your heart. It'll make you question who you are and what you stand for. There will be days when others try to tell you that your worth depends on what you ride, what you own, or how loud you are. Don't listen. The road is noisy, but truth rides quiet. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of an engine cooling nearby. Eli's hands shook as he continued reading. You were never meant to follow the crowd, Eli. You were meant to ride your own way. When you fall, and you will, don't be ashamed to get back up. Scratches are proof that you've lived. Keep your heart open, your hands steady, and your pride humble. And if you ever doubt yourself, remember, you don't ride alone. I'm with you, in every turn of the wheels, in every mile you take. By the time he reached the last line, Eli's voice had softened to a whisper. With all my love, Dad. The letter trembled in his hands as silence fell again. Even the sound of the street outside seemed to pause. Keanu looked down, his expression calm but deeply moved. Eli stood there, his eyes fixed on the paper as though it were still speaking. The words seemed to fill the entire shop, settling over everyone like a quiet blessing. For a moment, no one moved. The air carried the scent of oil and sunlight, but it also held something deeper, the weight of memory. Keanu took a slow step closer, his voice gentle. He already knew, he said softly. Your father knew what kind of man you'd become long before you did. Eli wiped his eyes, trying to smile. It's like he was still teaching me. Sarah nodded, her hand trembling slightly as she touched her son's shoulder. He wanted you to find your own road, Eli. Looks like you have. Blaze walked forward, his heavy boots echoing against the floor. He removed his gloves and stared at the letter, the edges fluttering in Eli's hands. Guess we all needed that reminder, he murmured. That the road's not about power, it's about purpose. Rex and Marco nodded silently, and even Tess, who usually found comfort in teasing, stood still, her eyes glistening. The words had hit everyone differently, but they landed in the same place in the heart. Keanu looked around at the faces gathered there. Every rider loses their way at some point, he said quietly. But the ones who make it home are the ones who keep listening to the right voices. Your dad's letter, that's one of those voices. Eli carefully folded the paper again, holding it close to his chest. I think I understand now, he said. He wasn't just talking about bikes. He was talking about life. Blaze smiled faintly. He was talking about all of us. Eli looked up, meeting Keanu's eyes. Do you think he'd be proud of me? Keanu nodded without hesitation. I think he's already riding beside you. For a while, they all stood in silence, letting the moment breathe. Outside, the afternoon light had begun to fade, casting long golden lines across the workshop floor. The bikes, polished and still, reflected the sunlight like mirrors, each one carrying its own story of loss, of hope, of redemption. Sarah placed the letter back in its envelope and handed it to Eli. "Keep it somewhere safe," she said softly. "It's your father's last lesson." Eli nodded. "I will." He walked over to his bike, running his hand along the silver-painted wings. The reflection of the letter's edges shimmered faintly against the polished chrome. "I think I'll take a ride," he said quietly. Keanu smiled. "Then ride with pride and peace." Blaze chuckled. "Mind if we tag along?" "Wouldn't feel right letting the kid hit the road alone after that speech." Eli grinned. "Sure. The more, the better." Engines roared to life again, not with defiance, but with reverence. As they rolled out of the shop into the amber dusk, Eli led the way, his father's letter tucked safely in his jacket pocket. The wind lifted gently. Around them, carrying the faint echo of words written long ago, "The road will test your heart. Don't let the noise of others drown your worth." For the first time, those words didn't just belong to Eli, they belonged to everyone who followed. The morning sun glimmered over the vast open field, lighting up rows of chrome like ripples on a silver ocean. Bikers from all across the state had gathered for the first ever Ride with Heart Festival, an event born from one act of kindness and now pulsing with life. Engines purred in harmony, the sound blending into a rhythm that spoke of freedom, forgiveness, and second chances. Colorful tents lined the perimeter of the field, displaying restored bikes of every make and age. Some were old machines reborn with fresh paint. Others were simple bicycles polished to perfection. Every one of them carried a story, and that was what the festival was about. Stories written in steel, sweat, and love. Keanu moved through the crowd, greeting volunteers and riders with his usual quiet warmth. Blaze walked beside him, wearing his new Riders of Honor patch proudly, nodding to familiar faces. The sight of once feared bikers now serving as road marshals for families made more than one person pause and smile. At the far end of the field stood a large wooden stage, draped with a banner that read, "Ride with Heart, restoring more than machines." On it, a single microphone waited under the spotlight, and beside it stood a covered motorcycle hidden beneath a black cloth. Eli stood behind the stage, straightening the collar of his simple denim jacket. His helmet sat nearby, gleaming under the light with the same silver engraving, "Ride with Pride." He peeked through the curtain, watching the growing crowd. Hundreds of bikers, families, and kids had come, all drawn by the story that had once started on a lonely Arizona road. Blaze stepped up beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You nervous?" Eli smiled nervously. "A little? What?" "If I mess up," Blaze chuckled. "Kid, you've already done more than most of us ever dreamed. Just speak from the road, not from fear." Keanu joined them, his calm presence grounding the moment. "You don't need to perform, Eli. You just need to tell the truth." Eli nodded. "Then I'll tell them what it meant." When the time came, Keanu walked onto the stage first to a wave of applause. His simple smile and modest wave quieted the crowd. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "This started as one small story, one boy, one bike, one act of decency. But it became something bigger. It became proof that the road connects us all, no matter where we start." He turned toward the curtain, and the person who reminded us of that truth is the young man standing right behind me. Please welcome Eli Turner. The applause that followed was thunderous. Eli stepped forward, heart pounding but face steady. The microphone felt heavy in his hands at first, but when he looked out and saw Keanu smiling at him and Blaze giving a quiet nod from the side, the fear melted away. He cleared his throat. "Every bike has a story," he began. "Mine started with a loss, but it keeps going because people cared." The crowd went silent, listening. For a heartbeat, the field stood still. Then the crowd erupted in applause, cheers echoing against the open sky. Eli smiled, blinking back tears he didn't expect. His voice carried steady through the speakers. "When I first met Mr. Reeves," he said, glancing toward Keanu, "I was scared. I thought being strong meant keeping quiet when people laughed. But he showed me that real strength doesn't come from noise, it comes from kindness. The crowd quieted again, listening closely. This bike, Eli continued, pointing to his gleaming, restored bicycle on the side of the stage, was my dad's last gift to me. He built it with his hands. When he passed, I thought I'd never ride again. But then, strangers stepped in, people who didn't owe me anything, and they helped me believe again. Every one of them reminded me that the road doesn't belong to the loudest riders. It belongs to the ones who ride with heart. He took a breath and smiled at Blaze, who stood proudly near the stage. So today isn't about bikes or engines. It's about stories, about how we fix each other one small act at a time. The applause that followed rolled like thunder. Keanu stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Eli's shoulder. "You've become the rider your father dreamed you'd be," he said softly. Eli looked up at him, eyes shining. "I had good teachers." Keanu nodded. "Then let's show them what you built." With that, he motioned toward the covered motorcycle beside them. Blaze climbed the steps, joining them. Together, Keanu and Blaze lifted the black cloth, revealing a masterpiece beneath sleek steel and chrome, polished to perfection. The tank was painted deep crimson with streaks of silver forming angel wings, and across the side in careful script were the words, "Redemption." The crowd gasped, then erupted in applause again. Keanu spoke into the mic. This bike was built by two hands from two worlds, one that had lost hope and one that helped him find it again. Eli and Blaze worked side by side to build this. We call it redemption. Blaze took the microphone, his voice rough with emotion. "When I met this kid, I wasn't proud of who I was. I was angry, lost. But this shop, these people, they reminded me that every rider deserves a second chance. I named this bike Redemption because that's what this road gave me." He turned toward Eli. "And kid, I think your old man would have been proud too." Eli smiled wide, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks, Blaze." Tess wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. Marco let out a low whistle. "That's one fine machine," he said. Keanu glanced over the crowd again. "Every person here has a story. Every machine you restore, every mile you ride, it all matters. Because what we build with love doesn't fade." The crowd rose to their feet, engines revving softly in salute. As Eli ran a hand along the gleaming tank, the silver wings shimmered in the sunlight, a symbol of every road healed by compassion and courage. The sun hung low over the horizon, bleeding orange and gold across the open sky. The final notes of applause from the festival faded behind them as the engines came alive once more. Keanu led the group out of town, his motorcycle glinting under the fading light. Behind him, Blaze and the Riders of Honor followed in perfect formation, their headlights glowing like beacons through the dusk. Eli pedaled hard to keep up, his silver helmet shining as it caught the last of the sun. The road ahead stretched endlessly, smooth and dark, cutting through the fields and hills like a ribbon of memory. The air was warm, heavy with dust and promise. For the first time, the roar of engines didn't intimidate him, it comforted him. The sound had become a heartbeat, steady and alive, echoing everything he had learned. Keanu slowed his pace, letting Eli pull alongside him. The two rode side by side, the rhythm of wheels and engines blending in harmony. "You're leading the pack now," Keanu said, his voice carrying through the wind. Eli looked ahead at the glowing horizon. "Guess it's time," he said quietly. Keanu nodded. "It's always time when you're ready." Behind them, Blaze shouted over the rumble. His laughter carried on the breeze. "Hey kid, save some road for the rest of us." Eli grinned, standing on the pedals for a moment to feel the rush of air on his face. "You better keep up," he yelled back. The group's laughter mixed with the steady growl of engines. For miles, they rode without speaking, just breathing in the vastness of the open road. The wind whipped through their jackets, carrying the scent of asphalt and wild sage. Every passing mile felt like both an ending and a beginning. As the sky deepened into purple, Blaze raised a hand from his handlebars. "To second chances!" he shouted, his voice booming against the wind. Keanu lifted his hand in return, smiling. To the ones who never stop riding. The others echoed the words, a chorus of voices lost in the roar of engines and the heartbeat of the road. Eli felt a lump rise in his throat, but it wasn't sadness, it was gratitude. The road that once frightened him had become the place where he found himself. They rode through the rolling hills until the lights of the town faded completely behind them. The world grew quiet, except for the hum of their engines and the faint chirping of crickets along the roadside. Keanu looked at the young boy beside him, steady, strong, sure, and felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead shimmered in the last breath of daylight, long, uncertain, and beautiful. Keanu smiled softly. "This is it, Eli. Your road." Eli nodded, gripping the handlebars tighter. "Then, let's ride it right." And together, they pushed forward into the deepening night, the sound of engines and wheels weaving a hymn of freedom, forgiveness, and the endless journey home. The night opened wide around them, the last streaks of daylight giving way to a sky blanketed with stars. The hum of engines filled the silence like music, low, steady, reverent. The road curved through the desert plains, and the horizon shimmered faintly in the distance. Dust rose beneath their tires, catching the silver moonlight. It was a ride without destination, one meant only for the feeling of motion itself. Keanu eased his bike closer to Eli again, the headlights behind them forming a golden trail across the empty highway. "How does it feel?" he asked. Eli smiled beneath his helmet. "Like I belong here." "You do," Keanu replied. "Every rider finds that one stretch of road where everything makes sense. You've found yours." For a while, they rode in silence again. The air carried the scent of earth and rain from a storm far away, and the hum of tires on asphalt created a rhythm that sounded almost like breathing. Blaze's bike pulled up beside them, his grin wide beneath the gleam of his visor. "Kid's keeping up with us better than I ever did my first year," he shouted. Eli laughed. "Guess I had good company." The group's laughter echoed through the night, bouncing off the open fields. It wasn't loud or wild, it was pure. A laughter that came from hearts lighter than they had been in years. They rode past a roadside diner where a few people stepped outside to watch. Someone clapped. Someone else lifted a phone to record. But the riders didn't stop this time. This wasn't about fame anymore. It was about peace. The wind cooled as they crossed a small bridge overlooking a creek that shimmered like glass in the moonlight. Keanu slowed slightly and looked over his shoulder at the line of bikers behind them. Blaze, Rex, Tess on her smaller cruiser, and even Marco, riding an old bike he'd rebuilt from scratch. The headlights moved in unison, their reflections like stars moving across the ground. "Looks like a family," Eli said quietly. Keanu nodded. That's what it became. As they reached the next stretch of open highway, Blaze revved his engine and called out, "One last run before we call it a night." Keanu grinned. "Lead us out, Blaze." The veteran rider nodded and accelerated, his bike roaring to life as the others followed. Eli pedaled faster, matching their rhythm, his legs strong, steady. The roar of the engines rose again, blending with the whisper of wind and the soft hum of the earth beneath them. It sounded like a hymn, the kind of music that doesn't come from instruments, but from shared souls moving in the same direction. Blaze lifted his hand high as he rode, shouting into the night, "To second chances!" Keanu echoed back, his voice deep and clear, "To the ones who never stop riding." Every rider behind them repeated it in unison, their voices merging with the roar of their machines. It wasn't just a chant, it was a promise to keep moving, to keep forgiving, to keep building instead of breaking. Eli's chest swelled with pride. He thought about his father's letter, about the words that still echoed inside him. Don't let the noise of others drown your worth. And for the first time, he truly understood them. The road wasn't about noise, it was about heart. As they crested the final hill, the valley below unfolded under the glow of moonlight. The road wound endlessly ahead, like a ribbon guiding them into the horizon. Keanu slowed his bike and let Eli roll slightly ahead. "Take it from here," Keanu said. Eli looked back and smiled. "You sure?" Keanu nodded. "You've been leading us since the day we met." Eli gripped his handlebars tighter, eyes focused on the horizon. "Then let's go farther." Keanu smiled. "Let's ride." And they did, into the open desert, where the stars watched over them and the road whispered beneath their tires. The engine sang softly, a song of redemption, brotherhood, and the kind of freedom that never ends. That night, as the horizon swallowed their silhouettes, one truth lingered. The road would always be waiting for those brave enough to ride it with heart. The screen opened on a quiet desert plain. The sun was setting behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in layers of orange and violet. Keanu sat alone on a flat rock beside his parked motorcycle. His helmet rested next to him, its surface catching the last rays of light. The wind whispered gently across the sand, carrying echoes of engines long gone. He looked out toward the horizon, his eyes calm, the corners of his mouth softened by thought. His voice came quietly, filled with warmth and reflection. "Kindness isn't weakness," he said. "It's courage, the kind that makes you stop when the world keeps driving by." His words carried through the fading light, lingering in the air like the hum of a motor after it's shut off. The camera drifted slowly over the desert road, the same stretch where a frightened boy once faced down a gang of bikers, and where everything changed. As Keanu's voice continued, the scene shifted. Eli appeared on screen, now older, smiling as he guided a group of kids through the workshop. He showed them how to sand down metal, how to hold tools with care, and how to treat every bike like it mattered. On the wall behind him hung his father's letter, framed under glass, its final line bold and unbroken. "Don't let the noise of others drown your worth." Keanu's voice spoke over the image. Sometimes, the smallest act of decency can echo louder than 1,000 words. It can rebuild what was broken, not just in machines, but in people. The scene shifted again to Blaze, standing beside his new crew, the Riders of Honor, helping a stranded traveler on a dusty roadside. They laughed together as Blaze handed the man a bottle of water, his once hardened face now lit by an easy smile. "He found his road again," Keanu's voice said softly, "because someone gave him the chance to." Footage rolled of Tess sketching new designs, Marco teaching teens how to tune engines, and volunteers loading newly restored bikes onto trailers for families who had lost parents. The Ride with Heart banner fluttered proudly above the workshop doors, the sound of tools blending with laughter and life. Keanu's words grew gentler. What started as a single ride became a chain of them, each one carried by the same truth, that respect, once shared, never dies. It just keeps traveling. The screen returned to Keanu, still seated at sunset. He picked up his helmet, turning it slowly in his hands. The faint engraving caught the light, "Ride with Pride." He smiled faintly. "Every road we take leaves something behind," he said. "Sometimes a tire mark, sometimes a lesson." He stood, setting the helmet on the motorcycle's seat, his gaze steady on the horizon. The road remembers those who ride with heart. The sound of the wind grew louder as the image slowly began to fade to twilight. The sun slipped lower, the light softening into a golden haze. Keanu walked toward his motorcycle and ran his fingers across the worn leather seat. He paused for a moment, his reflection faintly visible on the polished tank. Then he looked back toward the endless highway stretching behind him, a ribbon of memories, mistakes, and second chances. His voice returned, steady and reflective. "I've met people who reminded me that the road is more than a path between places. It's a mirror. It shows us who we are when no one's watching." A faint montage began. Eli rode down a country road, his restored bicycle gleaming beneath the morning sun. Noah, the young boy he'd mentored, rode beside him on a smaller bike, wobbling at first before steadying his balance. Eli reached over to guide him, smiling with quiet pride. Keanu's voice continued. "A boy who once feared the sound of engines learned to lead them. A man who once caused pain learned how to heal it. And a community that once drifted apart found its rhythm again." The montage shifted to Blaze and his Riders of Honor, helping at a roadside stop. They replaced a flat tire for a family's minivan. laughing with the kids as they worked. The mother handed them a folded note that read, "Thank you for stopping." Blaze tucked it into his jacket pocket with a grin. Keanu's tone deepened. That's all kindness really is, a choice to stop, to see, to care. It costs nothing, but it can change everything. Next came shots of the workshop at night. The glowing Ride with Heart sign illuminated rows of completed bikes. Tess and Marco closed up for the evening, the lights fading one by one until only the soft hum of the city remained. A close-up of Eli's framed letter hung above the door, the reflection of the neon sign glinting across the glass. Keanu's voice softened. One act of respect can start a chain reaction. It can rebuild bridges, heal hearts, change lives. All it takes is the courage to begin. The final scene returned to the desert. Keanu stood beside his motorcycle. The twilight sky awash in violet and crimson. The wind swept lightly across his hair. He slid on his helmet, the reflection of the setting sun glinting off the visor. Before starting the engine, he turned once more to face the horizon. "If you believe every act of respect can start a chain reaction," he said, his tone calm and certain, "share this story. Let the road carry it forward." The engine rumbled to life, its steady hum filling the silence. The camera rose slowly above him as he rode off toward the horizon, the golden dust curling around his tires. The fading light turned his silhouette into part of the landscape, another rider among countless others who had come before. The music swelled soft guitar strings mixed with the sound of wind and engines, while words appeared across the screen in bold, quiet lettering. "The road remembers those who ride with heart." Then the screen faded to black, replaced by two simple prompts in white letters. Have you ever met someone who changed your life with kindness? Tell us your story below. What should Keanu's next road story be? Suggest it in the comments. As the final notes played, the sound of a distant motorcycle echoed one last time, fading into silence, a reminder that the ride never really ends.